I used to think silence was just the absence of noise, but in my family, it was a weapon. When I refused to co-sign my brother's $55,000 truck loan, the yelling didn't last long. Instead, they just erased me. But in that quiet, I finally heard the truth they had been hiding for decades: the scratching of pens on unauthorized paperwork and the sound of my own identity being sold off. Piece by piece, the drive to Briar Glen always felt less like a homecoming and more like a regression. I was 33 years old. I had a title at a logistics firm that commanded respect, a condo in the city with a mortgage I paid early every month, and a credit score that I guarded like a fragile antique. I had built a life defined by stability, specifically because I had grown up in a house that treated financial solvency like a weather pattern, something that just happened to you, unpredictable and out of your control, rather than something you planned for. Yet, as soon as my tires crunched onto the gravel driveway of my childhood home, that carefully constructed armor seemed to dissolve. The house looked the same as it always did. The siding was a pale, peeling yellow, and the front porch sagged slightly to the left, a structural groan that my father, Mark, had been promising to fix since I was in middle school. I grabbed the bottle of Cabernet I had brought, a peace offering, or perhaps a shield, and walked up the steps. I expected a casual Tuesday night dinner. My mother, Diane, had called me 3 times earlier in the week to ensure I was coming. She had used that breathless, fragile tone she reserved for when she wanted to create an atmosphere of intimacy, insisting that it had been too long and that the family needed to be together. I should have known that when my mother demanded togetherness, she usually required something else entirely. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of pot roast was heavy in the air, thick with onions and gravy. It was my favorite meal when I was 10. Now, it just smelled like leverage. My brother, Evan, was already sitting at the dining table. He was 28, with the kind of rugged, boyish handsomeness that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. He was leaning back in his chair, tapping a fork against the edge of the table. Looking visibly anxious, when he saw me, he flashed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Lee," he said. "Long time." I set the wine down. "It has been 2 weeks. Evan," my mother bustled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral dish towel. Her eyes darted between us, assessing the temperature of the room. She came over and squeezed my arm, a gesture that felt less like a hug and more like a restraint check. "I am so glad you made it," she said, her voice pitched a little too high. "Sit down. Your father is washing up. We have a lot to catch up on." We sat. The conversation during the meal was stilted. We talked about the weather, which had been unseasonably rainy. We talked about my job, though I could tell they were not listening to the details of supply chain management. They were waiting. The air in the room was so tight it felt pressurized. My father ate in silence, cutting his meat with surgical precision, his eyes fixed on his plate. He looked older, the lines around his mouth etched deeper, but he had that same inscrutable expression I remembered from my childhood, the look of a man who was constantly weighing the cost of things. The moment the plates were cleared, the performance dropped. Evan reached under the table and pulled out a glossy brochure and a stack of paperwork. Sliding them across the tablecloth toward me, the glossy paper hissed against the fabric. I looked down. It was a spec sheet for a truck. Not just a truck, but a behemoth. A heavy-duty, lifted, charcoal gray pickup with chrome accents and tires that looked like they belonged on a battlefield. It was beautiful, in the way predatory animals are beautiful. Next to the brochure was a loan application. "I need a favor." "Leah," Evan said. He tried to sound casual, but his voice cracked on the last syllable. I picked up the paper. My eyes went immediately to the bottom line. A habit from my job. I felt a cold jolt in my stomach. $55,000. I looked up at him. "Evan, this is $55,000. It is for work," Evan said quickly, leaning forward. His charm was turned up to maximum voltage now. "I am getting into contracting. I need something reliable. My old sedan cannot haul lumber. I need a rig that shows I am serious." I scanned the document. The interest rate was not filled in. The term length was blank, but there was a highlighted line at the bottom. Cosigner. I looked at my parents. My mother was watching me with an intense, hopeful stare, her hands clasped under her chin. My father was watching me too, but his gaze was flat, calculating. I put the paper down carefully. Evan, I said, keeping my voice steady. Who is the employer? I told you, he said. I am contracting, independent. Who are the clients? I asked. Do you have signed contracts? Do you have a business plan? This is a lot of vehicle for a startup gig. He waved his hand dismissively. It is not a gig, Lee. It is a career. But I cannot get the jobs if I show up in a Honda Civic. I need the truck to get the work. It is an investment. I looked at the numbers again. $55,000 was not an investment for someone with Evan's history. It was an anchor. Evan had bounced between jobs for a decade. Bartending, landscaping, a brief stint selling solar panels that ended in a lawsuit he refused to discuss. He had never held a position for more than 18 months. I cannot sign this. Evan, I said. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Why not? He asked. The charm was evaporating, replaced by a sudden, sharp petulance. Because it is $55,000. I said, what is the interest rate? The dealership said they could get me a good rate. But I need a cosigner. He said, my credit is a little banged up. You know that. A little banged up was a euphemism. I knew for a fact Evan had defaulted on a credit card 2 years ago because my mother had called me crying about the collections notices. I looked at the application again. Have you tried getting pre-approved on your own? Or maybe looking at a used model? You can get a solid work truck for $20,000. I do not want a piece of junk. Evan snapped. I need something that lasts. And they said with a strong cosigner, I could get single-digit interest. You are the only one with good credit. Leah. He said it like it was an accusation. You are the only one with good credit. As if my credit score was a natural resource I was hoarding, rather than a record of 15 years of denying myself vacations and luxury items to pay my bills on time. I looked at my mother. Mom? She sighed. A long, ragged sound. Leah, honey, we have tried. We tried to sign for him, but, well, with the house repairs and your father's business being slow, the bank said no. We just need you to help him get his foot in the door. So you want me to take on a $55,000 liability for a job that does not exist yet? I asked. It exists, Evan shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. Why do you always have to interrogate me? I am trying to build something here. Leah. My father spoke for the first time. His voice was gravelly and low. It is just a signature. Evan is going to make the payments. And if he does not? I asked. He will, Diane insisted. He promised. I looked at Evan. He was red-faced, his jaw tight. I looked at the brochure. This wasn't a work truck. It was a toy. It was a status symbol. He didn't have a business plan. He had a fantasy where this truck would make people respect him. And he wanted me to buy the ticket for it. I cannot do it, I said, pushing the paper back toward him. I am looking to buy a house in the next 2 years. I cannot have this debt-to-income ratio on my report. It would tank my buying power. You are so selfish, Evan hissed. I am not being selfish. I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I am being realistic. Evan, if you miss a payment, the bank does not call you. They call me. They sue me. Family does not say no. Leah, my mother said. Her voice was icy now. The fragility was gone. You help family. That is what we do. After everything we did for you, we put you through college. I took out student loans. I corrected her. I paid them off myself. You lived under this roof. She countered. You ate our food. And now, when your brother finally has a chance to make something of himself, you are going to stand in his way because you are worried about your, what? Your credit score? It is just a number. Leah, people are more important than numbers. It is not just a number. I said, it is my life. Mark leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table. You think you are better than us, he said. I stared at him. stunned. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact in his mind. "No, Dad, I don't—" "You come here with your fancy wine and your city clothes," Mark continued, gesturing at my blazer, "and you look down your nose at your brother trying to make an honest living. You have forgotten where you come from." "I haven't forgotten anything," I said. Standing up, my legs felt weak. I offered to help him find a used truck. I offered to help him build a budget. I offered to help him write a business plan. But I will not sign a loan for $55,000. That is my final answer. Evan stood up too, knocking his chair back. "Get out," he said. "Evan," Diane started. "No, let her go," Evan said. "If she doesn't want to be part of this family, she can leave. She obviously doesn't care if I fail." I grabbed my purse. The injustice of it burned in my throat like bile. I had been the one who fixed their computer every time it broke. I was the one who mediated their arguments. I was the one who bought the groceries for Christmas dinner every single year because money was tight. And now, because I wouldn't mortgage my future for a truck, I was the villain. I am not the one walking away from this family. I said, my hand on the doorknob, "You are pushing me out because I won't pay for it." I walked out the door. No one followed me. As I walked down the steps, I heard the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding home behind me. The drive back to the city was a blur. I was shaking so hard I had to pull over at a rest stop 10 miles outside of Briar Glen just to breathe. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the inevitable barrage of guilt-tripping texts. But my phone remained silent. I checked it after 10 minutes. Nothing. I checked it after 20. Nothing. By the next morning, the silence had curdled into something purposeful. I called my mother on my lunch break. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Diane. Leave a message." I hung up. I opened the family group chat. The one named Russell Clan with a little tree emoji. It was gone. It wasn't just quiet. It was missing. I searched for it in my archived messages, thinking maybe I had accidentally swiped it away. Then I realized I hadn't been removed. The group had been deleted and reformed without me. Or maybe I had just been blocked by everyone in it. I went to check my aunt's Facebook page. She was my mother's sister, and usually, she liked every single photo I posted, often within minutes. I had posted a picture of my morning coffee with a generic caption about Wednesday. Nothing. I clicked on her profile. It was visible. But there were no recent interactions on my timeline. It felt petty, high school level exclusion, but it made my chest ache. It was a coordinated shunning. I met Tessa for drinks that Friday. Tessa had been my best friend since college. She was a lawyer, sharp-tongued and fiercely protective. I told her everything: the truck, the ambush, the deadbolt locking behind me. She listened, sipping her martini, her eyes narrowing with every detail. "Leah," she said, setting her glass down, "you know this isn't about the truck, right? It feels like it is about the truck." I said, "No." Tessa said, "It is about the resource. You are the resource. You are the one who has your act together. So you are the one they harvest when they need something." "Harvest? That makes me sound like a crop." "That is what you are to them," she said bluntly. "Look at the pattern. Who paid for your grandmother's funeral costs when the insurance lapsed? You. Who paid for the deductible when Evan wrecked his last car? You. Who bailed your dad out when he owed that supplier 3 years ago? You. I loaned them that money," I said weakly. "They are paying me back." "Are they?" Tessa asked. "Or did they just stop talking about it until you stopped asking?" I looked down at my drink. She was right. The loans had slowly dissolved into gifts through the erosion of silence. Every time I brought it up, there was a crisis, or a guilt trip, or a silent treatment until I let it go to keep the peace. "They are freezing you out to punish you," Tessa said. "It is classic conditioning. They withdraw love to make you compliant. When you break, and you sign that paper, they will love you again." "Do not break. I am not going to break," I said. "But it hurts." Tessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know. But checking your credit wouldn't hurt. Just to be safe." I frowned. "Why? I didn't sign anything. Because desperate people do desperate things, she said. And $55,000 makes people very desperate. The comment stuck with me. Later that night, sitting in the blue glow of my laptop in my quiet apartment, I felt a gnawing anxiety. I told myself I was being paranoid. My family was dysfunctional. Yes, manipulative, absolutely. But they weren't criminals. Still, I navigated to the credit bureau website. I had a monitoring service I checked occasionally, but I decided to pull the full report. I typed in my social security number, verified my identity, and waited for the wheel to spin. The report loaded. I scrolled past my student loans, paid in full. I scrolled past my mortgage, current. I scrolled past my credit cards, zero balance. Then I saw the section labeled Hard Inquiries. My breath hitched. There were 2 inquiries dated 3 days ago. Northline Auto Finance. Northline Auto Finance. I hadn't applied to Northline Auto Finance. I hadn't applied for anything. The date matched the day of the dinner, the day of the ambush. My hands started to tremble. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for Northline listed on the report. Even though it was 8 at night, I got an automated system, navigated through the hell of menus, and finally, miraculously, got a late-night representative on the line. Northline Finance. This is Kevin. How can I help you? Hi, I said, my voice sounding thin in the empty room. My name is Leah Russell. I am looking at my credit report, and I see 2 inquiries from your bank that I did not authorize. I need to know what they are for. One moment. Ms. Russell, let me pull that up. Verification questions. Okay, thank you. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. The silence stretched for an eternity. Okay, I see the application here, Kevin said. It was submitted on Tuesday. It is for a 2024 GMC Sierra. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not submit that application. Oh, Kevin said. He sounded confused. Well, you are listed as the co-borrower. Co-borrower? I asked. Who is the primary? Evan Russell. He said. I closed my eyes. The room seemed to spin. Kevin, I said, forcing the words out. I did not sign that application. I was asked to, and I refused. How is my name on it? Well, it is listed as pending signature, Kevin explained. It looks like the application was started online. Your personal information, social security number, address, income, was entered to run the pre-approval check. That generates the hard inquiry. The loan cannot be finalized until we get the wet signatures or the e-sign verification. But the credit pull happens when the application is submitted. So someone used my social security number to run a credit check without my permission? Yes, ma'am. That appears to be what happened. If you are saying you were not present, I was not present. I said, Okay, Kevin said, his voice shifting to a more formal, wary tone. Since the loan is not funded yet, I can flag this application. But if you believe this is identity theft, you will need to file a police report and send us a copy to have the inquiry removed from your bureau report. I stared at the wall. A police report. Against my brother. Against my parents. Thank you. Kevin, please flag it. Do not fund that loan. I will mark it as fraud alert. Ms. Russell, is there anything else? No. Thank you. I hung up the phone and sat there in the dark. It wasn't just a request. They hadn't just asked me to co-sign. They had already entered my data. They had my social security number memorized, or written down somewhere. They had sat at a computer, likely before I even arrived at the house, and typed in my life's history into a web form, banking on the fact that once the approval came through, they could bully me into scribbling my name on the final line. They didn't respect my no because they had never intended to give me a choice. I looked at the phone, at the blank screen where the family group chat used to be. The silence from them wasn't just punishment. It was a holding pattern. They were waiting to see if the loan would go through anyway, or if I would come crawling back to apologize. The anxiety in my chest began to cool, hardening into something cold and heavy, like iron. Tessa was right. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a co-signer. I was a credit score. I was a resource to be mined. I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it Documentation. Then I opened a Word document. Entry 1. Unauthorized credit inquiry. Northline Auto Finance. I didn't call them. I didn't text Evan to scream at him. I didn't drive back to Briar Glen to demand an explanation. That was what the old Leah would have done. Engaged, argued, tried to make them understand. But the old Leah was gone. She had been erased from the group chat. The new Leah was going to be exactly what they said she was. Cold, calculating, and obsessed with the numbers. I saved the file. Then I opened the credit bureau website again. Initiate credit freeze. I clicked the button. The lock icon appeared on the screen. It was done. No more arguments. I would not fight them with words anymore. I would fight them with paper. The act of freezing my credit felt less like a financial administrative task and more like physically boarding up the windows of my own house while a storm raged outside. I sat at my kitchen island, the laptop screen glowing blue in the dim light of the apartment, and navigated the websites of the 3 major credit bureaus: Equifax, freeze; Experian, freeze; TransUnion, freeze. Each click required a PIN, a password, a verification question. What was the name of your first pet? What is the street you grew up on? The irony of typing Briar Glen as a security answer while locking my parents out of my financial life was not lost on me. It felt like a betrayal. That was the conditioning kicking in. The voice in the back of my head, my mother's voice, whispering that privacy was just another word for secrecy. And secrecy was a sin against the family unit, but I kept clicking when the final confirmation screen appeared, telling me that no new creditors could access my file without a specific unthawing key. I slumped back in my chair. I expected to feel safe. Instead, I felt a profound, aching grief. I had just changed the locks on the people who had raised me. I poured another cup of coffee, though it was 8 in the evening, and decided to do the thing I had been avoiding. I downloaded the full, detailed PDF versions of my credit reports. Not the summary scores I usually glanced at, but the 50-page documents that listed every transaction, every address, and every account attached to my Social Security number for the last 10 years. I scrolled through the pages, my eyes scanning for the familiar: my student loans, closed and paid, my car lease from 3 years ago, the mortgage on my condo. Then I stopped. On page 12 of the TransUnion report, there was an entry I did not recognize. Creditor: Harbor and Pine Furnishings. Status: closed/derogatory history. Opened: October 2018. High balance: $4,200. Payment history: 30 days late, November. 60 days late, December. Paid in full, February. I stared at the date, October 2018. I was not in Briar Glen in 2018. I was living in Chicago, finishing my master's degree, barely scraping by on a stipend and eating ramen so I wouldn't have to ask for money. I certainly hadn't bought $4,000 worth of furniture. I looked at the address listed for the account. It wasn't my Chicago apartment. It was my parents' house, 1402 Oak Creek Lane. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A slow, heavy thud. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a clerical error where someone with a similar name got mixed up with my file. This was deliberate. I remembered that autumn. My father had hurt his back. I remembered my mother mentioning on the phone that they finally got a new sectional and a recliner that helped him sleep. I had been happy for them. I had congratulated them. They had bought it in my name. They had opened a store credit card using my Social Security number, charged $4,000, missed 2 payments, damaging my credit score while I was hundreds of miles away studying for finals, and then eventually paid it off, likely with a tax refund, and never told me. The betrayal felt physical, like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the money, it was the entitlement. They had treated my identity like a spare credit card they kept in a drawer, just in case. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking. I didn't plan the conversation. I just hit the speed dial for Mom. It rang 4 times, usually, during a silent treatment. She wouldn't answer, but perhaps she thought I was calling to apologize, to capitulate on the truck loan. Hello? Her voice was cool, guarded. I am looking at my credit report. Mom, I said. I skipped the greeting. There was a pause, a long, staticky silence. Why are you doing that? She asked. Because Northline Auto Finance did a hard pull on me this week without my permission. I said, but that is not what I'm calling about. I am looking at an account from Harbor and Pine Furnishings, from 2018. Another silence. This one was heavier. Leah, that was years ago, she said. Her tone shifted from guarded to dismissive. I know it was years ago. I said, I was in Chicago. I didn't buy furniture. You did. In my name. Your father needed that chair. Leah. He was in agony. You remember his back. He couldn't sleep in the bed. So you opened a credit account in my name? Without asking me? We couldn't get approved, she said, as if this explained everything. We had too much utilization on the cards because of the roof repair. We just needed a little bridge, and we paid it off. You missed 2 payments. I said, it is marked as derogatory. It is still on my report. Oh, stop it, she snapped. It was paid. It is closed. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. No one was hurt. You still got your condo, didn't you? Your credit is fine. That is not the point, I shouted, losing my composure. The point is that it is illegal. It is fraud. You impersonated me. We are your parents, Diane yelled back, her voice trembling with indignation. We raised you. We fed you. And you're going to use the word fraud? Because we bought a chair so your father wouldn't be in pain? You could have asked me, I said, my voice breaking. If you had asked me, I might have helped you, but you stole from me. We did what we had to do, she said. That is what families do. We survive. We don't worry about paperwork when someone is in pain. I thought we raised you to care about people more than rules. Then she hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. The disconnect tone hummed in my ear. She hadn't denied it. She hadn't apologized. She had reframed the theft as an act of parental survival and my objection as a character flaw. I was still sitting there, frozen, when a text message came through. It was from Evan. It was the first time he had communicated with me since he told me to get out of the house. You're really going to ruin my life over a signature? I stared at the words. Ruin my life. The manipulation was so precise it was almost elegant. He truly believed it, in the narrative my family had constructed. Evan was the protagonist on a hero's journey who just needed a little help. And I was the obstacle. The dragon hoarding the gold. The signature wasn't a $55,000 liability to him. It was just a magic word I was refusing to say. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I needed air. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt suffocating. I grabbed my keys and walked out. I didn't have a destination in mind, but my car seemed to know where to go. I drove north, out of the city, onto the highway that led toward Briar Glen. I didn't go to my parents' house. I couldn't face the peeling yellow siding. Instead, I drove through the town, past the strip mall where Evan used to hang out, past the grocery store where my mother had worked part-time for 20 years. I ended up parking near the high school, at the edge of the football field. It was a Saturday, and the field was empty, the grass overgrown. I got out and walked along the chain-link fence. The air smelled of cut grass and asphalt, the specific perfume of American suburbia. Leah? I turned. A woman was walking a golden retriever on the sidewalk behind me. She was older now, her hair completely gray, but I recognized the kind eyes and the practical cardigan. It was Mrs. Carver, my high school guidance counselor. Mrs. Carver, I said, surprised. Hi, Leah Russell, she said, smiling warmly. My goodness, I haven't seen you in a decade. How are you? I am. Good. I lied. Just visiting. You look successful, she said, scanning my blazer in my car. I always knew you would be. You were the most organized student I ever had. I smiled weakly. I tried. You did more than try, she said, laughing softly. I remember you coming into my office junior year to reschedule Evan's classes because he was failing algebra. You had his whole semester mapped out on a color-coded spreadsheet. I don't think I ever saw his parents at a conference, but I saw you every week. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had forgotten that. I was 17, and Evan was 12. I had managed his homework schedule. I had signed his permission slips for field trips, forging my mother's signature because she was too tired to deal with the paperwork. You used to take care of everyone, Mrs. Carver said. Oblivious to the turmoil inside me, you were like a little mother. It was sweet. Really. Although, I used to worry you didn't have enough time to just be a kid. She tugged gently on the leash. Well, it is lovely to see you. Leah, tell your folks I said hello. She walked away, humming a tune. I stood by the fence, gripping the cold metal links. You were like a little mother. It wasn't sweet. It was grooming. I realized then that this didn't start with the truck. It didn't start with the furniture in 2018. It started when I was 10 years old and learned to balance the checkbook because my father wouldn't do it. It started when I was 15 and called the electric company to negotiate a payment plan so the lights wouldn't get cut off. Pretending to be my mother, they hadn't just stolen my credit. They had stolen my childhood. They had trained me to be the safety net, and now they were furious that the net was closed. I got back in my car and drove home, my mind racing. If they had opened a furniture account, what else had they done? How did they have my information so readily available? When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop again. I went to my email archives. I searched for keywords: Social Security, license, passport, tax. I scrolled back through years of emails. Then I found it. An email sent 5 years ago. Subject: FWD Insurance. Quote: To Diane Russell, from Leah Russell. Attachment: Leah_license_scan.jpg Leah_SSN_card.pdf. I clicked on the email. I remembered the day. My mother had called me in a panic. She said their car insurance was about to lapse because the premium had spiked, and she needed to shop for a new policy. She said the agent told her that if she added me to the policy as a household driver, even though I didn't live there, it might lower the rate because of my clean driving record and good credit score. Just send me the info. Leah. It's just for a quote. It will save us $600 a year. I had scanned my license and my Social Security card and emailed them to her. I stared at the screen. I had handed them the keys. That email was sitting in her inbox, or printed out in that chaotic pile of papers on the dining room table. Whenever they needed a reference or a co-borrower, all they had to do was open that file. My phone rang again. It wasn't a family member. It was a number I didn't recognize, a local area code, but not Briar Glen. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Is this Leah Russell? A male voice, brusque, professional but aggressive. Yes. Who is this? This is Mr. Henderson from Ridgeway Recovery Services. I am trying to reach a Mark Russell. My stomach dropped. That was my father. I am not Mark Russell. I said, I know. Mr. Henderson said, but you are listed as a personal reference on his account. We have been trying to reach him for 3 months regarding a delinquent outstanding balance. His phone seems to be disconnected. He put me down as a reference? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, ma'am. We have your number and your address listed here. Can you get a message to him? It is urgent that he contacts us before we move to legal proceedings. What is the debt for? I asked. I cannot disclose the details of the debt to a third party. He recited, but if you could tell him to call Ridgeway Recovery, I don't live with him. I said, please remove my number. I can note that. But until we reach him, you are the verified contact, he said. I hung up. I was shaking. A verified contact. That meant my father had filled out a loan application. Maybe for tools. Maybe for cash. Maybe for the business. And when they asked for references, he hadn't asked his friends or his brother. He had written down Leah Russell. He knew they would call me if he didn't pay. He knew I would be the firewall between him and the consequences. They were using my name as a shield. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I was drowning in a sea of paperwork I hadn't signed. I opened a new browser tab. Consumer protection attorney near me. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of Dana Miles. The office was in a glass-walled building downtown. It smelled of coffee and expensive leather. It was the opposite of Briar Glen. Dana was a sharp woman in her 40s with glasses and a demeanor that suggested she had heard every variation of a sad story the world had to offer. She sat across from me, reviewing the binder I had put together, the credit report, the screenshot of the email with my ID, the notes from the call with Northline Auto Finance. She flipped a page, adjusted her glasses, and looked at me. "This is textbook," she said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the emotional static that was cluttering my brain. "We call it familiar fraud. It is actually the most common type of identity theft. It is not hackers in a basement in Russia. It is usually mom, dad, or a sibling." She tapped the page with the Harbor and Pine account. "This account is the smoking gun," she said. "The statute of limitations might be tricky since it is closed, but it establishes a pattern. The inquiry from Northline is the immediate threat. And the collections call suggests there are other debts out there where you are linked, even if you are not the borrower." "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I sue them?" Dana leaned back. "You can. We can file a police report for identity theft. That is the nuclear option. If you file a police report, you can send it to the credit bureaus, and these accounts disappear within 30 days. It cleans your record instantly. But?" I asked. I heard the but in her tone. "But," she said, "once you file a police report, it is out of your hands. The district attorney could pick it up. Your brother could be charged with felony fraud. Your parents could be charged as accomplices. People go to jail for $55,000 fraud attempts." I stared at my hands. I was angry. I was furious. But the thought of seeing Evan in handcuffs, or my mother in a courtroom, it made me feel sick. "I can't put them in jail," I whispered. Dana nodded. "I understand. Most clients feel that way. So, here is option B." She pulled a notepad forward. "Option B is the paper shield," she said. "We don't call the police yet. Instead, we treat this like a hostile business negotiation. We document everything. We send a formal cease and desist letter to your family members. We put fraud alerts, not just freezes, on your files. We dispute the inquiries as unauthorized without naming the perpetrator yet. Will that stop them?" I asked. "It might," she said, "or it might escalate them. When you cut off a parasite, it gets hungry. They will try to reattach. But if they do, we will have the paper trail to prove intent." She looked me in the eye. "Leah, you need to understand something. You are not protecting your credit anymore. You are protecting your identity. They are not just borrowing money, they are impersonating you. If your brother crashes that truck and gets sued, and your name is on the title, you lose your condo, you lose your savings. This is not a family squabble. This is liability exposure." I took a deep breath. The word liability grounded me. I could understand liability. I dealt with it at work every day. "Let's go with option B." I said, "I want to draft the cease and desist." Dana smiled. A tight, professional smile. "Good choice. But Leah?" "Yes?" "Don't tell them you are doing it. Just send the letters. Certified mail. Let the postman deliver the message. If you tell them, they will try to talk you out of it. Documents don't argue." I left her office an hour later. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city streets. I felt heavy, but for the first time in a week, I didn't feel confused. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to send a certified letter. I walked to my car, my phone buzzing in my pocket. I checked the screen. It was my sister. "Mara, Leah, just a heads up. Mom is really mad. She says you are being dramatic. Just be careful." I looked at the message, then put the phone away. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being legal, and for the Russell family, that was the most terrifying thing I could possibly be. The intercom in my apartment buzzed at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. It was a jarring sound, harsh and metallic, slicing through the quiet hum of the dishwasher. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked at the grainy black and white video monitor on the wall. It was Evan. He was standing in the lobby, looking up at the camera. He wasn't wearing his usual work boots and flannel. He was wearing a clean polo shirt and holding a cardboard box. He looked like a delivery man who had lost his way, or a penitent child waiting to be let back into the classroom. I debated not buzzing him in. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could pretend the system was broken, but the box intrigued me. And a small, foolish part of me, the part that remembered teaching him how to tie his shoes, wanted to know if he had come to apologize. I pressed the button. When I opened my front door, he was already stepping off the elevator. He offered a smile that was clearly rehearsed, tight at the corners. "Hey, Lee," he said. "Hi, Evan." I didn't step aside to let him in immediately. I stood in the doorway, a physical barrier. "Mom found this in the attic," he said, lifting the box slightly. "She thought you might want it. It has your old debate trophies, and that scrapbook you made in middle school. She didn't want it to get ruined with the humidity up there. It was a peace offering, a Trojan horse made of cardboard." I stepped back. "Come in." He walked into my living room and looked around. My apartment was modern, minimalist, decorated in cool grays and blues. It was the antithesis of the cluttered, chaotic home we had grown up in. Evan always looked too big for my furniture, like a bull in a china shop. He set the box down on the coffee table. "Nice place," he said, as if he hadn't been there a dozen times before. "You keep it clean." I poured him a glass of water without asking. I didn't offer beer or wine. I wanted this visit to be brief and sober. "What are you doing here?" "Evan?" I asked, handing him the glass. He took a sip, his eyes darting around the room before landing on me. I just wanted to drop this off. And I wanted to talk, without Mom and Dad hovering. I sat in the armchair opposite him. "I am listening." He sat on the edge of the sofa, his elbows on his knees. "Look, I know things got heated at dinner. I shouldn't have yelled. I am sorry." I nodded. "Thank you. But Lee, you have to understand where I'm coming from," he continued, the apology immediately pivoting into a justification. "This truck, it is not just about hauling lumber. It is about the image." "The image?" I asked. "Yeah, you know, presentation." He leaned back, scrubbing a hand over his face. He looked tired. Beneath the bravado, he looked terrified. "I met this girl," he said, "Ashley. She is great. She is a nurse. Her dad owns a chain of hardware stores in the next county." I waited. "We have been dating for 3 months," he said. "I went to dinner at their place last week. Their driveway was full of these massive, brand-new trucks. Her brothers, her dad. They all drive these $80,000 rigs, and I pulled up in my rusted sedan with the muffler held on by wire. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I stamped it down. "So you want me to co-sign a $55,000 loan so you can impress your girlfriend's father?" "It is not just that," he protested, but his face flushed red. "It is about respect. If I pull up to a job site, or to her house, in a beater, nobody takes me seriously. They look at me like I am some kid. I need to look the part. Leah, I need to look successful to become successful. That is not how it works. Evan," I said gently, "you become successful, and then you buy the truck. You don't buy the truck to pretend you are successful. That is just debt." He stood up and began to pace. "You sound exactly like a banker. You don't get it. You have the degree. You have the corporate job. You have the credit score. You don't know what it is like to be the one who is behind. I am not a banker." I said, "I am your sister, and I'm telling you that taking on a payment you cannot afford is going to drown you." "I can afford it," he insisted. "Once I get the contracts." "Evan," I cut him off. "Be honest with me. Did you already sign something?" He stopped pacing. He turned his back to me, looking out the window at the city skyline. He didn't answer. "Evan?" "They said I could take it home for the weekend if I signed a purchase agreement," he said, his voice low. "It is contingent on funding." My stomach turned. Contingent on funding meant he had legally agreed to buy the vehicle. Provided he could find a loan, if he couldn't, he had to return it, often with fees, or the dealer would hound him. It meant he was already emotionally committed. He had probably already shown it to Ashley. He had probably already posted a picture of it on Instagram. "You drove it off the lot?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I have been driving it for 3 days. So where is it now?" "I parked it around the block," he admitted. "I didn't want you to see it and get mad." I rubbed my temples. "Evan, why would you take the truck before the loan was approved?" "Because Mom and Dad said you would sign," he shouted. Spinning around, the truth finally came out. It hung in the air between us, vibrating. "They told me to just go get it," Evan said, his voice cracking. "They said, 'Don't worry about the financing. Leah will come around. She always does. She just needs to make her point and then she will sign.'" So I signed the papers. I showed up at Ashley's house in it. Everyone loves it. And now if I have to take it back. He trailed off, looking at me with wet eyes. "If I have to take it back, I am going to look like a complete loser. Ashley's dad will know I am a fraud. My friends will laugh at me. You are going to humiliate me." "Leah." I sat there, stunned by the cruelty of our parents. They had set him up. They knew I had said no. They knew I was serious, but they had sent him into the dealership anyway, winding him up like a toy soldier and marching him off a cliff. Convinced that my guilt would be the parachute, they had weaponized his insecurity and his desire for approval to force my hand. "They lied to you, Evan," I said quietly. "I told them no. I told them no repeatedly. They shouldn't have let you drive that truck off the lot." "Well, they did," he said, "and now I am in a hole. You are the only one who can pull me out. Just sign the paper. Leah, I will pay it. I swear. I will pick up extra shifts. I will do whatever. Just don't make me take it back." He looked so young then. He was 28. But he looked 12, asking me to fix a toy he had broken. "I can't," I said. His face hardened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, defensive anger. "You can," he said. "You just won't." "I won't." I agreed. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed the box off the coffee table. "I don't want your charity," he spat. "And I don't want you to have this stuff. You don't deserve the memories if you don't care about the family." He stormed out. The door slammed behind him, shaking the frame. I sat in the silence, listening to the elevator ding. I felt sick, not because I had said no, but because I realized that to my parents, Evan's humiliation was acceptable collateral damage in their war to control my finances. They were willing to let him crash and burn just to test my boundaries. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Reconciliation, brunch, Sunday at 11, Juniper House Cafe. Please come. We need to clear the air. No fighting, just family." I stared at the screen. Juniper House Cafe was a trendy spot in the city, halfway between my apartment and Briar Glen. It was expensive. It was public. It was neutral ground. My attorney's voice echoed in my head. "Document everything, but don't tell them you are documenting." I typed back, "I will be there." I prepared for the brunch like I prepared for a quarterly audit at work. I didn't bring a binder. That would be too aggressive. But I brought a notebook. I dressed in a sharp blazer and slacks. I wanted to project authority. I wanted to remind them that I was not the teenager they used to boss around, nor the 20-something pushover who paid for vacations. When I arrived at Juniper House, the host led me to a circular table in the back corner. They were already there. My mother, Diane, wearing a floral blouse and a tight smile. My father, Mark, looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt. Evan, staring sullenly at a menu. And my older sister, Mara. Mara was 36. She lived 20 minutes from our parents with her husband and 2 kids. She was the peacemaker, the one who absorbed the family tension and metabolized it into migraines and anxiety. She looked pale. When she saw me, she gave a tiny, frantic wave. I sat down. "Hi, everyone," I said. "Hello, Leah," my mother said. She reached across the table and patted my hand. "Thank you for coming. We really wanted to do this, to fix things." I withdrew my hand gently to pick up my napkin. "I am happy to talk," I said. We ordered drinks, mimosas for them, black coffee for me. The waiter bustled away. and the air at the table grew heavy. "Leah," my father started. He cleared his throat. "We know we came on too strong the other night. We apologize." I nodded. "I appreciate that. But," he continued, his tone hardening slightly, "we are in a bind. Evan is in a bind. We need to solve this problem as a family." I looked at Evan. He was refusing to make eye contact. "I listened to what you said," Diane interjected. "You said you were worried about the liability, about the payments. We understand that. You have worked hard for your credit." I waited for the but. "But," she said, smiling brightly, "we have a plan. We are not just asking you to co-sign blindly. We want to show you that we are serious. Evan is going to put down a substantial down payment. That lowers the risk, right?" "A down payment is good." I said cautiously, "How much?" "Well, that is the thing." Evan mumbled, "I don't have it right now." "So where is it coming from?" I asked. My father leaned forward. "That is where we all pitch in. We are asking you to help with the down payment, just a temporary gift, to get the loan-to-value ratio down so the bank is happy, and to cover the first year of insurance." I stared at him. I did the math in my head. "How much?" I asked. $7,500. Mark said. I almost laughed. It was so audacious, it was absurd. They had invited me to a reconciliation brunch to ask me for more than they had asked for originally. Before, they just wanted my signature. Now, they wanted my signature and a check for nearly $8,000. "So, let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level. "You want me to co-sign a $55,000 loan, which makes me liable for the entire debt, and you also want me to give you $7,500 in cash? It is an investment in your brother's future." Diane said, "Think of it as startup capital." "And when do I get this investment back?" I asked. "When the business takes off," Evan said. Looking up, "I will pay you back. Within a year, I promise." I opened my notebook. "Okay," I said. "If this is a business investment, treat me like an investor. Evan, show me your budget." "What?" Evan asked. "Your budget," I repeated. "Show me your projected income for the next 6 months. Show me your current expenses. Rent, utilities, food, existing debt payments. Show me the contract for this contracting work. Show me the pay stubs from your last job so I can verify your income stability." Diane frowned. "Leah, this isn't a bank interview. This is brunch. You are asking me for $55,000 of liability and $7,500 of cash." I said, "That makes it a business transaction. If you want me to sign, I need to see that you can actually make the payments, because if you can't, the bank comes after me. So, prove to me you can afford this truck. I don't have a spreadsheet on me." "Leah," Evan snapped, "then I can't help you." I said calmly. Mark's face turned a mottled purple. He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. A few people at nearby tables looked over. "Stop it," Mark hissed. "Stop acting like you are the IRS. You are auditing your own family? It is insulting. It is not insulting." "Dad," I said, "it is due diligence. It is disrespectful." Diane cried out, her voice rising. "We are your parents. We asked you for help. We didn't ask you to grade us. You sit there with your notebook and your questions like you are better than us, like you are the judge and jury. I am the one with the credit score you need." I said, "That gives me the right to ask questions." "You have that credit score because we raised you," Mark shouted. "Because we supported you. You owe us. I don't owe you my financial future." I said. The waiter arrived with the drinks. Looking terrified, he set the glasses down quickly and retreated. Mara, who hadn't said a word, suddenly reached for the sugar bowl in the center of the table. Her hand was shaking. As she pulled the bowl toward her, she slid a small white cocktail napkin across the table toward me. She did it quickly. While Mark and Diane were glaring at me, I looked down. On the napkin, written in shaky ballpoint pen, were 7 words. "Check Dad's business account. It's worse than you think." I looked up at Mara. She was staring intently at her menu, her face pale. She wouldn't meet my eyes. A chill went down my spine. Mara was the compliant one. She never rocked the boat, if she was passing me secret notes. The situation was far more volatile than I realized. Worse than you think. I covered the napkin with my hand and slid it into my lap. I looked back at my father. He was breathing heavily, his nostrils flaring. I realized then that his anger wasn't just about authority, it was about fear. He didn't want me to see the numbers because the numbers were a disaster. He didn't want me to audit Evan because auditing Evan would lead to auditing the family. And the family was insolvent. The truck wasn't just a truck, it was a life raft. Or maybe it was just another credit line to tap before the whole house of cards collapsed. I closed my notebook. I am not going to give you the money, I said, and I am not going to co-sign. Diane let out a sob. You are ruining everything. I stood up. I placed a $20 bill on the table for my coffee. I am not ruining anything, I said. I am refusing to enable this. If you want to discuss this again, you can email me the documents I asked for. Pay stubs, loan terms, budget. Until then, the answer is no. Leah, sit down, Mark commanded. I didn't sit down. I looked at Mara one last time. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Goodbye, I said. I walked out of the Juniper House Cafe. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could hear Diane starting to cry louder. A performance for the other diners, positioning herself as the victim of a heartless daughter. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. My hands were trembling. I pulled the napkin out of my pocket. Checked Dad's business account. I didn't have access to my father's business account, but the warning confirmed what the collections call from Ridgeway Recovery had hinted at. The rot went deep. My father's business, Russell Outdoor Supply, had been struggling for years, but he always claimed it was just a seasonal dip if Mara was scared. It meant she knew something specific. It meant she had probably seen a notice, or overheard a phone call, or maybe she had already been tapped for money and was tapped out. I realized Mara wasn't cruel for staying silent at the table. She was a hostage. She lived in the same town. She relied on them for childcare. She was trapped in the web of obligation and guilt that I had escaped by moving to the city. My refusal was dangerous to her because if I didn't pay, the pressure would shift to someone else, and she was the next available target. I took a deep breath and started the car. I drove 2 blocks away and pulled over. I needed to set the boundary in stone. I needed it in writing, time-stamped, so they couldn't twist my words later. I opened my phone. I created a new group chat with Mom, Dad, and Evan. I typed the message slowly, reading it over 3 times. I want to be clear about what happened today. I love you, but I will not co-sign for the truck. I will not gift $7,500 for the down payment. Do not ask me again. I am willing to help Evan look for a used vehicle within his actual budget, but I will not mix my finances with yours. If you want to discuss this further, send the financial documents I requested via email. Otherwise, this topic is closed. I hit send. I watched the status. Delivered. Then, the 3 dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then the dots disappeared. Then they appeared again. Then they disappeared. No one replied. The silence that followed felt different than the silent treatment from the week before. That first silence had been punitive. A timeout for a naughty child. This silence felt heavy. It felt like the hush in a room when a weapon is drawn. It felt like the calm before a siege. I drove home, the napkin burning a hole in my pocket. I knew what I had to do next. I had frozen my credit, but I hadn't investigated the depth of the infection. If my father's business was failing, and he was using family members as financial patches, I needed to know if I was already listed on his business accounts. I remembered the authorized signer form I had seen on a desk years ago. A fleeting memory. I called Dana Miles, my attorney, from the car. Dana, it is Leah. Hi, Leah. Did you send the letters? I am sending them tomorrow. I said, but I need to add something. Is there a way to check if I am listed as an officer or a guarantor on a small business LLC? Yes. She said, we can run a LexisNexis search. Why? Because I think my $55,000 problem is actually a much bigger problem. I said, and I think my father is the one who created it. I hung up and merged onto the highway. The city skyline rose ahead of me, steel and glass, a world away from Briar Glen. But I knew I couldn't outrun this. The wires were already crossed. The debts were likely already there, buried in paperwork I had never seen. I wasn't just fighting for my future anymore. I was unearthing the past, and I was terrified of what I was about to find. The silence from my family was not empty. It was heavy, like the atmospheric pressure drop before a tornado touches down. I went to work, I went to the gym, I came home, I checked my phone, which remained blissfully, terrifyingly quiet. Then, the dismantling began. It started with a notification on Tuesday morning I was added to, and then immediately removed from, an email chain titled, Grandma's 81st, Planning Committee. I stared at the screen. My grandmother, Edith, was turning 80 in 2 months. I had been the one to reserve the banquet hall 6 months ago. I had put down the $500 deposit on my own credit card. I had designed the invitations. I clicked on the thread. The organizer was my Aunt Sarah, the one who had stopped liking my photos. The message history showed a brief flurry of activity where tasks were assigned. Flowers to Mara. Food to my mother. Slideshow to Evan. My name was nowhere on the list. I had been erased. It was petty. High school level exclusion. But it stung. They knew I loved my grandmother. They knew I was the only one organized enough to actually pull the event off without chaos. By cutting me out, they were telling me that my membership in the family was revocable. 2 hours later, a second email arrived. This one was from Vista Lake Rentals. Dear Leah, per your request, we have canceled the reservation for the Cedar Cabin for the week of July 4th. The refund of $1,200 has been credited to the card on file ending in 4492. I froze. The Cedar Cabin at Lake Claire was a family tradition. We went every year. I had paid the deposit back in January because my parents were cash poor after Christmas. The card ending in 4492 was my father's card. But the account was under my name as the primary contact because I was the one with the reward status. I hadn't canceled the trip. I picked up the phone and called the rental agency. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, vibrating rage. Vista Lake Rentals. This is Sherry. Hi, Sherry. This is Leah Russell. I just got a cancellation notice for my reservation in July. I didn't authorize that cancellation. Oh, Sherry said, typing in the background. Let me look. Yes, I see here it was canceled this morning via the online portal. Who canceled it? I asked. It was done through your login. Ms. Russell? I closed my eyes. I had shared my login password with my mother years ago so she could browse the cabins and pick the one she wanted. I had never changed it. Sherry, can you see the IP address of the device that made the change? I asked. I work in IT. I added, lying smoothly to grease the wheels. I think my account might have been compromised. 1 second. She said, Okay. The system logs show the access came from IP address. Let me see. It traces back to a residential provider in Briar Glen. Briar Glen. My parents' house. They had used my own login to cancel a vacation I had organized, effectively uninviting me from the summer trip, and refunded the money to my father's card. They had liquidated the holiday. It was a tactical strike. They were stripping away the shared history, the future plans, the sentimental glue that held us together. They were showing me what life would look like if I didn't sign the loan. Empty. Thank you. Sherry. I said, please leave it canceled, and please change the password on the account to a temporary one sent to my email. I hung up. I didn't cry. I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just a dispute about a truck. This was a siege. They were burning the crops to starve me out. I opened my documentation folder. Entry 2. Unauthorized access of vacation rental account. Cancellation of booking. IP address. Traced to parents' home. I spent the rest of the evening assembling the binder. It was a grim task. I printed out the credit report with the Northline inquiries. I printed the email from Vista Lake Rentals. I printed the screenshots of the text messages where Evan admitted to signing the purchase agreement before funding. Then I tackled the furniture account, the Harbor and Pine credit line from years ago. I needed to dispute it to clean my credit report, but the bureaus required proof that it wasn't me. I pulled my bank statements from 2018. I highlighted my rent payments in Chicago. I found utility bills in my name for my Chicago apartment for the months the furniture was bought in Briar Glen. I found credit card transactions showing I was buying coffee in the Loop at the exact time the furniture was being signed for 300 miles away. It was tedious. Forensic work. It was painful to look at those old statements and remember who I was then. A 25-year-old student working 2 jobs, eating oatmeal for dinner, thinking I was building a future. While back home, my parents were forging my signature to buy a recliner. I felt like a detective investigating my own murder. But the real blow didn't come from the past. It came the next day, at my office. I worked as a logistics manager for a mid-sized shipping firm. It was a professional environment, quiet and focused. My personal life never bled into my work. I kept those worlds strictly separated. Around 2 in the afternoon, my direct supervisor, Karen, knocked on my cubicle wall. She looked uncomfortable. "Leah, can I see you in my office for a minute?" I stood up, my stomach tightening. Karen was usually cheerful. Today, she wouldn't meet my eyes. I followed her into her office. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Karen sighed and sat on the edge of her desk. "Leah, this is awkward, and I'm only telling you this because I value you as an employee. But we got a call on the main line today." "A call?" "Yes. It was an anonymous tip. A woman. She wouldn't give her name, but she sounded concerned." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew who it was. "What did she say?" I asked, my voice steady. "She asked if we were aware that you were being investigated for financial fraud." Karen said gently. "She said she was a concerned community member, and that she didn't want the company to be liable if you were mishandling funds." The room spun. It was a lie, a nuclear lie, but it was designed to do maximum damage. My job involved managing shipping manifests and approving vendor invoices. If I was suspected of fraud, I could be fired. Or at least suspended. "Karen," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "that is absolutely false. I am not being investigated for anything. I am currently in a legal dispute with my family regarding identity theft committed against me. I believe that call was a retaliation tactic from a relative." Karen studied my face. The tension in her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Okay," she said. I had a feeling it was personal. The caller sounded emotional. She kept saying, "People need to know what kind of person she is." It didn't sound like a whistleblower. It sounded like a vendetta. "It is a vendetta." I said, "I am so sorry this reached the office. It won't affect my work." "I know." Karen said, "I am going to disregard it. But I wanted you to know, if she calls again, we will block the number." "Thank you." Karen. I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling like lead. It was my mother. I knew it was my mother. The phrase "people need to know what kind of person she is" was her signature move. She used it whenever someone crossed her. She would destroy their reputation under the guise of concern. She had tried to get me fired. She was willing to jeopardize my livelihood, my career, my ability to pay my mortgage, all because I wouldn't sign a loan for a truck. She didn't care if I was safe. She didn't care if I was employed. She only cared if I was compliant. I sat at my desk and stared at my computer screen. The spreadsheet of shipping routes blurred. I realized then that there was no bottom. There was no line they wouldn't cross. If I didn't stop them, they would burn my entire life to the ground just to rule over the ashes. I left work early. I couldn't focus. I drove straight to Tessa's apartment. Tessa took one look at my face and opened a bottle of wine. "They called my work," I said, sitting on her floor. Tessa froze, the corkscrew in her hand. "Who? My mother? Or someone she put up to it? They told my boss I was being investigated for fraud." Tessa slammed the bottle down on the counter. "That is it. That is the line. We are going into lockdown. She spent the next 3 hours acting as my digital bodyguard. We changed every password I owned: email, banking, social media, Netflix, even my pharmacy login. We set them to random strings of 20 characters that I had to write down in a physical notebook. We set up two-factor authentication on everything. Linked to an authenticator app. Not my phone number. Tessa warned that SIM swapping was a thing. Though it seemed unlikely my parents were that tech-savvy, but we weren't taking chances. Then, Tessa drove me to the post office. I rented a P.O. box. From now on, Tessa said, handing me the shiny brass key, all your mail goes here, your bank statements, your legal letters, everything. If they have a key to your apartment building, or if they just snoop when they visit, they can't see your mail. I held the key. It felt cold and small. It feels like I am hiding. I said, "You are not hiding," Tessa said firmly. "You are fortifying." That evening, I got a text from Mara. "Can you meet me? Tonight, 9 p.m., the park near the river. Please come alone." The secrecy scared me. But I had to know what was on that napkin. The park was dark, illuminated only by the amber glow of streetlights reflecting off the river. I saw Mara's minivan parked in the shadows. She was sitting on a bench near the water, wrapped in a heavy coat, smoking a cigarette. I hadn't seen Mara smoke since high school. I sat down next to her. "You shouldn't be here," she said, not looking at me. "If Mom knew I was talking to you, she would cut me off, and I need them for babysitting. Leah, I can't afford daycare." "I know," I said softly. "I won't tell them." Mara took a long drag of the cigarette and exhaled a plume of smoke. "You were right to ask for the budget," she said. "Tell me," I said. "It is Dad's business." She said, "Russell Outdoor Supply. It has been underwater for 3 years." I knew it was slow. I said, "But he always said it was just seasonal." "It is not seasonal," Mara said. "It is terminal. He lost the contract with the state parks 2 years ago. That was 50% of his revenue. He didn't tell anyone. He tried to pivot to online sales, but he doesn't know how to run an e-commerce site. He has been bleeding cash. How is he staying open?" "Loans," Mara said grimly. "But not bank loans. He is maxed out at the bank. He is taking those predatory short-term loans, merchant cash advances, the ones with 60% interest rates." "Oh my God," I whispered. "He is paying one loan with another loan," she said, "and he is using personal guarantees on everything. He put the house up as collateral for a note last year. If he defaults, they lose the house." I felt sick. The peeling yellow siding, the porch that needed fixing, it was all mortgaged to the hilt. "What does this have to do with Evan's truck?" I asked. "Everything," Mara said, turning to look at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Evan doesn't just want the truck for his image. Leah, Dad wants the truck. I don't understand. Dad's credit is shot," Mara explained. "He can't finance a pack of gum right now, but he needs a vehicle for the business deliveries because the old van died. He can't buy it under the business name because the creditors would seize it, or he just wouldn't get approved. So he convinced Evan to buy it." She said, he told Evan, "You buy this truck, put it in your name, and I will lease it back from you for the business. I will make the payments. You just build your credit and look cool driving it on the weekends." My mouth fell open. It wasn't Evan's truck. It was Mark's truck. Evan is the straw buyer. I realized. "Exactly," Mara said. "And since Evan has no credit, they needed a cosigner. That is you." The pieces clicked together like the tumblers of a safe. The pressure, the guilt trip, the refusal to show me the budget. Mark was using Evan as a shield to hide assets from his business creditors, and he was using me as the guarantor to finance the whole scheme. If I signed, I wouldn't just be backing Evan's bad decision. I would be backing a failing business's hidden asset. When, not if, Mark couldn't make the payments. The business would collapse, the truck would be repossessed, and the bank would come after me for the $55,000. Evan doesn't even know the business is failing. "Does he?" I asked. "No," Mara said. "Evan thinks Dad is a genius. He thinks he is helping the family empire. He doesn't know the empire is a tent made of tissue paper. And the $7,500? I asked. The down payment gift? Payroll, Mara whispered. Dad missed payroll last week. He needs cash to pay his 2 guys so they don't quit. He was going to use your gift to plug the hole and pray something came in next week. I sat back against the bench, looking up at the dark sky. It was so much worse than I thought. It wasn't just irresponsibility. It was a Ponzi scheme built on family loyalty. They were going to take my money to pay his employees, use my credit to buy a truck he couldn't afford, and leave me holding the bag when the sheriff came to padlock the doors. And they were willing to get me fired to make it happen. Does Mom know? I asked. Mom knows everything, Mara said. She signs the papers. She thinks if they can just keep the balls in the air for 1 more month, a miracle will happen. She sees you as the miracle. Leah, you are the only one with fresh blood they haven't sucked dry yet. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was the final death of the illusion. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I checked my own credit report yesterday. Mara said, her voice trembling. I looked at her. And? There is a credit card, she said. $20,000. Opened 3 years ago. It is maxed out. I grabbed her hand. Mara, I can't fight them. Leah, she sobbed quietly. I can't. I have the kids. I can't leave. But you can. You are out. Stay out. Do not sign that paper. Do not give them a dime. Run. She squeezed my hand hard, then pulled away. She wiped her face, lit another cigarette, and stood up. I never said this. She said, I never heard it. I answered. She walked back to her minivan and drove away. I sat on the bench for a long time. The wind coming off the river was cold. I felt stripped clean. The family I thought I had, the struggling but loving parents, the misguided but well-meaning brother, didn't exist. I was the daughter of a desperate man running a shell game and a mother who was his enforcer. I stood up. I was done being a victim. I was done being a resource. I drove home and called Dana Miles. It was late, but I left a message on her specialized client voicemail. Dana, it is Leah. I am ready to send the letters, and I want to make them stronger. I want a complete cease and desist. I want to formally notify them that any further use of my name will result in immediate legal action. I am coming in tomorrow morning. The next morning, the office felt different. I wasn't the confused daughter asking for advice. I was a client giving instructions. Dana drafted the letters. They were beautiful in their brutality. To Mark and Diane Russell, this letter serves as a formal cease and desist regarding the unauthorized use of Leah Russell's personal identification information. Demand is hereby made that you immediately cease any and all use of Miss Russell's name, social security number, and credit history for any purpose whatsoever. Miss Russell has placed fraud alerts on all credit files. Any further attempts to access her accounts, impersonate her to third parties, including employers, or incur debt in her name will be reported to the appropriate authorities as criminal identity theft. We drafted a separate one for Evan, specifically referencing the truck application. Dana looked at me as she printed them on heavy, cream-colored bond paper. Are you sure? She asked. Once you mail these, you can't unmail them. This is a declaration of war. I looked at the signature line. They declared war when they called my boss. I said, I am just returning fire. I signed them. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet office. I took the envelopes to the post office myself. I didn't trust the office mailroom. I stood at the counter. Certified mail. Please. I told the clerk. Return receipt requested. She weighed the envelopes. One for Mom and Dad, one for Evan. That will be $14.80. I paid it. She slapped the green stickers on the envelopes. She handed me the receipts with the tracking numbers. I walked out into the sunshine. I felt lightheaded. I had just sued my family. Essentially, I had drawn a legal line in the sand that said, you stop here. I went home. I made tea. I sat on my couch. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows of cars passing by on the street below. I knew how the mail worked. They would get the slips tomorrow. They would have to sign for them. They would open the heavy bond envelopes. They would read the legal jargon. They would be furious. They would be hurt. They would feel betrayed. But for the first time in my life, they would be afraid of me, and they should be. Because I wasn't Leah the helper anymore. I wasn't Leah the resource. I was Leah the plaintiff. And I had receipts. Around 3 a.m, the exhaustion finally overtook the adrenaline. I drifted into a fitful sleep, dreaming of yellow houses with peeling paint and trucks that drove off cliffs, carrying everyone I loved inside them, while I stood on the edge, holding the only rope, and refused to throw it. I woke up gasping. It was morning. The tracking numbers on my phone showed a status update. Out for delivery. It had begun. The call came at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. The kind of hour that suggests catastrophe, because everyone should be at work. I was in the middle of a vendor reconciliation meeting when my phone vibrated against the mahogany conference table. I glanced at the screen. Mom, I sent it to voicemail. I had sent the cease and desist letters 2 days ago. I knew they had arrived yesterday. I was not going to engage in an emotional firefight while discussing freight tariffs. It rang again immediately. I declined it again. Then a text popped up. Dad collapsed. Ambulance. Pick up. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. The room full of logistics coordinators blurred. All my anger, all my legal posturing, all my resolve instantly evaporated, replaced by the primitive, terrifying instinct of a child whose parent is mortal. I stood up. I have to go, I said, interrupting my boss mid-sentence. It is a family emergency. I ran to my car. I called my mother as I sped out of the parking garage, my tires screeching on the concrete. Mom, is he okay? Where are you? Which hospital? He is at home, Diane said. Her voice was tight, breathless. The paramedics just left. They wanted to take him, but he refused. He is stubborn. What happened? I asked. Merging onto the highway, I was driving too fast, 70 miles per hour in a 55 zone. It was his heart, she said, or a panic attack. They are not sure. His chest was tight. He couldn't breathe. He turned gray. Leah, I have never seen him that color. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Is he stable? For now, she said. Then her voice shifted. It dropped an octave, becoming heavy with accusation. The stress. Leah, the doctor said his blood pressure was through the roof. He asked if he had been under any severe emotional strain lately. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I didn't answer. He got your letter yesterday, she said softly. The certified one. He read it. And he just sat there holding his chest. He couldn't believe his own daughter would threaten him with the police. That broke him. Leah, you broke his heart. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and shameful. I am coming, I said. I drove the 40 miles to Briar Glen in a trance of panic. My mind was a war zone. Part of me was terrified I had actually killed my father with a piece of paper. The other part, the part that had been talking to Dana Miles, was whispering that this timing was suspicious. But I couldn't listen to the lawyer in my head. I was a daughter first. When I pulled into the driveway, Evan's truck, the $55,000 charcoal gray monstrosity, was parked prominently in the center. Blocking the garage, it gleamed in the sunlight, a massive, shiny monument to our ruin. I parked on the grass and ran up the steps. The front door was unlocked. Dad? I called out. I rushed into the living room, expecting to see a hospital bed, or oxygen tanks, or my father lying on the couch with a damp rag on his forehead. Instead, I found him sitting at the dining room table. He was fully dressed in a polo shirt and khakis. He looked pale. Yes, but he was sitting upright, sipping a glass of iced tea. He wasn't surrounded by medical equipment. He was surrounded by paper. The dining table was covered in documents, bank statements, ledgers, file folders, and legal pads were spread out in a chaotic fan. Sitting across from him were Diane and Evan. They all looked up when I burst in, breathless and terrified. You are okay, I exhaled, leaning against the doorframe. Mark looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, but his gaze was steady. He didn't look like a man who had just survived a cardiac event. He looked like a man who was ready to negotiate. "Sit down." "Leah," Diane said. She gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. I looked at the table. I looked at my father, who was taking a calm sip of his tea. "Did the paramedics actually come?" I asked, my voice hardening. "They checked his vitals." Diane said quickly, "His pressure is still dangerous. He needs calm. He needs resolution. That is why we are here." I realized then that I had been summoned. The emergency was a flare gun to get me into the room because I had stopped answering the phone. They knew I wouldn't come for a meeting, but I would come for a funeral. I walked to the table slowly. I didn't sit down. I stood behind the chair, gripping the back of it like a barricade. "You scared me to death," I said. "We are the ones who are scared." "Leah," Mark said. His voice was raspy. "We got your letter. You want to report us for identity theft? Your own parents? I want you to stop using my name." I said, "We are not criminals." He snapped, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. "We are a family business, and right now, the business is in a crisis." He gestured to the papers on the table. "Look at this," he commanded. I looked down. It was a mess. Unpaid invoices, late notices from suppliers, and a terrifyingly low balance on a business checking account statement. "This is the reality." Mark said, "Russell Outdoor Supply is bleeding. We lost the state park contract. We had a bad winter. Inventory is sitting in the warehouse. What does this have to do with me?" I asked. "Or the truck?" "The truck isn't for Evan to look cool," Mark admitted, dropping the pretense finally. "We need it for inventory runs. The delivery van died 3 months ago. We have been renting a U-Haul every week to move product, and it is eating up our margins. We need a heavy-duty truck to haul the trailers." I looked at Evan. He was staring at his hands, picking at a hangnail. "So the story about the contracting gig was a lie?" I asked. Evan looked up. His eyes were wet. "I wanted it to be true. Lee, Dad said if I got the truck, I could use it for the business during the week. And then I could start my own thing on the weekends. He said it was a way for me to help the family and help myself. He signed things he didn't understand." Mark interrupted. "He is a good son. He did what I asked. He did what you asked because he wants your approval." I said, "And you use that to saddle him with a debt he can't pay for a business that is failing." "It is not failing," Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It is a cash flow gap. That is all. If we get the truck, we can fulfill the spring orders. If we fulfill the spring orders, we get the receivables. Then we are back in the black." He looked at me, his eyes desperate and wild. "We just need a bridge." "Leah, you are the bridge." I looked at the chaos of papers. It wasn't a bridge. It was a cliff. "I cannot co-sign for a business vehicle disguised as a personal loan." I said, "That is fraud, Dad. If the bank knew the truck was for commercial use, the interest rate would be double, and the insurance would be triple. You are asking me to lie to a lender." Diane stood up. She walked around the table and stood next to me. She was holding a document. It looked homemade. It was typed on plain paper, with a title in bold, "Family Repayment and Indemnification Agreement." "We came up with a compromise," she said, her voice soothing, as if she were offering me a cookie. "We don't want you to feel unsafe, so we drafted this." She handed it to me. I read it. It was nonsense. It stated that Evan promised to pay the loan, and if he didn't, Mark and Diane promised to pay it to the best of their ability. It had a clause at the bottom that said if any legal dispute arose, the signatory, me, would cover the family's legal costs to preserve family harmony. It was unenforceable. It was sloppy. It was a trap dressed up as a peace treaty. "This isn't a legal document." "Mom," I said, dropping it on the table, "this is a wish list. It offers me zero protection. It offers you our word," Diane said, offended. Your word doesn't stop the bank from garnishing my wages. I said. Evan made a sound. A choked, high-pitched sob. I can't take it back, he whispered. We all looked at him. I went to the dealership yesterday, he said, tears streaming down his face. I tried to return it. They said once I drove it off the lot. It was a used car. They said the value dropped 20% instantly. If I return it now, I owe them $11,000 in negative equity. I don't have $11,000. He looked at me, pleading. I am trapped. Leah, if you don't sign, they sue me. I have nothing. I don't want to declare bankruptcy at 28. I didn't want to look small anymore. All my friends have houses. They have trucks. I just wanted to look like I was somebody. His honesty was heartbreaking. He was a victim of his own vanity. Yes, but mostly, he was a victim of our parents promising him a shortcut that didn't exist. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out my binder. I am sorry. Evan, I said gently, but I cannot set myself on fire to keep you warm. I opened the binder on the table, right on top of Mark's disorganized pile. The contrast was stark. My organized, tabbed, color-coded evidence against their chaotic mess. I pointed to the first tab. This is my credit report, I said. It shows the unauthorized inquiry from Northline. I flipped the page. This is the lender note from the dispute I filed yesterday. They confirmed the application was submitted with my social security number from an IP address in this house. I flipped to the next section. This is the timeline of the Harbor and Pine account from 2018. The furniture you bought in my name while I was in Chicago. Mark went still. Diane looked away. I know about the furniture, I said, and I know about the vacation rental cancellation. I have the logs for that too. I looked at my parents. You are not asking for a favor. I said, you are engaged in a systematic pattern of identity theft. You have been using me as a resource for years. The certified letters you received yesterday were not a threat. They were a boundary. I am done. Mark stared at the binder. He looked defeated. For a second, I thought it was over. I thought he would hang his head and apologize. But then his eyes shifted. He looked at a specific stack of papers near his elbow, a stack he had been trying to cover with his arm. He moved his arm slightly to reach for his tea, and the top paper slid. I saw my name. It wasn't a typed name. It was a signature. Leah Russell. It was on a document with a heavy, official-looking stamp at the bottom. I reached out and grabbed the paper before he could stop me. Leah, don't, Mark started, reaching for it. I pulled it away and held it up to the light. It was a commercial line of credit authorization for Russell Outdoor Supply. The lender was a company called Quick Cap Funding. The amount was $25,000, and there, at the bottom, was my name listed as authorized guarantor, and next to it was my signature. It looked like my signature. It had the loop on the L and the sharp double ses. It was a good forgery, but what made my blood freeze was the stamp next to it. Notarized by Brenda Miller, Notary Public, State of Ohio. Dated 3 weeks ago. I stared at the document. A notary stamp meant someone had physically verified the identity of the signer. It meant my parents hadn't just forged a signature online. They had either duped a notary or, more likely, used a friend who was a notary to stamp a document without me present. This wasn't just a dispute. This was a felony. This was high-level criminal fraud. I looked at Mark. My hand holding the paper was shaking, not with fear, but with the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. Who is Brenda Miller? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Mark didn't answer. He looked down at the table. Diane spoke up. She is a friend from church, and you took this document to her. I said, and you told her I signed it? Or did you sign it in front of her and pretend to be me? We needed the cash for payroll. Mark mumbled. The bank wouldn't look at us. QuickCap said yes. But they needed a secondary signer with a 700-plus credit score. It was just for 6 months. Leah, we were going to pay it off before you even knew. Before I even knew? I repeated. You notarized a forgery. Do you understand what that means? That means if you default, they don't just sue me. They have a legal judgment ready to go because it is notarized. You put my neck in a noose and handed the rope to a loan shark. I didn't think—" Mark started. "No." I said, "You didn't care." I looked at Evan. He was staring at the notarized paper with his mouth open. "Did you know about this?" I asked him. Evan shook his head slowly. "No, I swear. Lee, I thought it was just the truck. I believed him. Evan was a pawn. Mark was the player." I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt thin, like we were at a high altitude. "I am keeping this," I said, folding the document and sliding it into my binder. "You can't take that," Mark said, standing up. "That is a business record. It is evidence of a crime." I said, "I am taking it, and I'm taking copies of everything else on this table that has my name on it." I started grabbing papers, the application for the truck, the denial letter from another bank that listed me as a reference. Mark moved to stop me. His hand raised. Diane screamed, "Mark, no!" I didn't flinch. I looked my father in the eye. "Touch me, and I call the police right now," I said, "and this time, it won't be a certified letter." He froze. He saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. He saw the end of his control. He saw the daughter who had fixed his computer and balanced his checkbook vanish, replaced by a stranger who would put him in jail. He lowered his hand. I finished gathering the papers. I clicked the binder rings shut. The sound was loud in the silent room. "I am leaving," I said. "I am going to take these to Dana Miles. She will advise me on the next steps." I looked at Diane. She was weeping silently, her hands covering her face. "You asked for a compromise." I said to her, "Here is the compromise. I won't call the sheriff today. I will give you 24 hours to figure out how to remove my name from that line of credit and return that truck. If you don't, my attorney files the identity theft affidavit with the district attorney. But we can't." Diane sobbed. "We can't pay it off. Then you better sell something." I said, "Sell the inventory. Sell the tools. I don't care. But you will not sell me." I turned and walked toward the door. I heard a chair scrape against the floor. I turned back, ready to defend myself. It was Mara. I hadn't realized she had come in. She must have been in the kitchen, listening. She was standing in the hallway, holding a dish towel. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. She walked past Mark and Diane without looking at them. She walked past Evan, who was burying his head in his arms. She walked right up to me. "I will walk you to your car," she said. We walked out of the house together, down the steps, past the shiny charcoal truck that was worth more than my brother's dignity. When we reached my car, Mara stopped. She looked back at the house. The yellow siding looked sickly in the bright sun. I heard what they did. She whispered, "The notary. Brenda Miller." "Yeah," I said. "That is prison time." "Leah," Mara said. "I know." Mara looked at me. Her hands were shaking, twisting the dish towel. "If you have to do it, if you have to report them." "I will tell the truth," she said. "I will tell them about the credit card they opened in my name, too. I will tell them about the pattern." I looked at my sister. She was terrified. She was still dependent on them, but she was offering me the only weapon she had, her voice. "Thank you, Mara," I said. "I hope it doesn't come to that." "It might," she said. "They are drowning, Leah, and drowning people climb on top of anyone to breathe." I got in my car. I locked the doors. I drove away from Briar Glen. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't victory. It was the cold, hollow feeling of amputation. I had just cut off a limb to save the body. The fight wasn't about the truck anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that my father had looked me in the eye, feigned a heart attack, and tried to trick me into signing a legal waiver, all while knowing he had already committed a felony against me 3 weeks prior. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a signature, and as I merged onto the highway, heading back to the safety of the city and my attorney's office, I realized something else. I was no longer Leah the responsible. I was no longer Leah the good daughter. I was Leah the evidence, and the evidence was about to speak. The morning after I walked out of my parents' house with the binder of evidence, the world felt sharper, colder, and infinitely clearer. I sat in Dana Miles's office, a pen hovering over a document titled Identity Theft Affidavit. It was a heavy document. It wasn't just a complaint form. It was a sworn statement under penalty of perjury that a crime had been committed against me. By signing it, I was formally accusing the people who gave me life of stealing it. You understand the implications. Leah? Dana asked softly. She was watching me closely. Once we file this with the Federal Trade Commission and send it to the bureaus, it triggers a criminal investigation flag. We are sending a copy to QuickCap Funding regarding that forged notary seal. That notary, Brenda Miller, will likely lose her license. Your father could face felony charges for uttering a forged instrument. I looked at the signature on the paper. It was my name, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was the handwriting of a desperate man who thought he owned me. I understand. I said. I signed it. The ink looked very dark against the white paper. Now, Dana said, briskly moving to the next phase. We go on the offensive. We are sending a fraud alert to Northline Auto Finance. We are notifying them that the application for the $55,000 truck was fraudulent and unauthorized. They will kill the deal immediately. Evan will have to return the truck, or they will repossess it. Do it, I said. We sent the notices. By noon, my phone buzzed with an email from the Credit Monitoring Service. Alert. Fraud statement. Added to TransUnion file. Alert. Fraud statement. Added to Equifax file. Alert. New inquiry from Northline Auto Finance. Disputed. I had erected a digital fortress around my identity. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought the silence would return. Colder and more permanent this time. But desperation is a powerful fuel. 2 days later, I received a voicemail. Not from my mother, not from my father. It was from Mr. Heller at the Briar Glen Community Credit Union. Miss Russell, this is Greg Heller. I am the branch manager here in Briar Glen. Your parents, Mark and Diane Russell, have scheduled a meeting with me for tomorrow morning at 9 to discuss the restructuring of the family accounts and the pending guarantor requirements. They indicated you would be joining us to finalize the paperwork. Please call me to confirm. I replayed the message. Restructuring of the family accounts, pending guarantor requirements. They hadn't stopped. Even after the cease and desist. Even after I stole the forged document from their table. They were trying one last maneuver. They were trying to ambush me in a public place, in front of a bank officer, banking on the fact that I would be too polite to cause a scene in my hometown branch. They thought if they put me in a chair across from a man in a tie, I would revert to the obedient daughter and sign whatever they put in front of me to avoid embarrassment. They were trying to use social pressure to crack the legal wall I had built. I called Dana. Are you free tomorrow morning? I asked. For what? A field trip to Briar Glen. I said, my parents scheduled a closing meeting for a loan I didn't agree to. I think we should attend. Dana's voice brightened. Oh, I would love to attend. We met in the parking lot of the Briar Glen Community Credit Union at 8:50 in the morning. The building was a red brick box from the 1970s, the kind of place that smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. My parents' car was already there. Evan's truck was there too, parked diagonally across 2 spaces, looking aggressive and out of place. Dana smoothed her suit jacket. She looked like a shark in a sea of goldfish. Let me do the talking initially, she said. You just hold the binder. We walked in. The lobby was quiet. My parents and Evan were sitting in the glass-walled office of the branch manager, Mr. Heller. They were dressed up. Mark was wearing a blazer that was slightly too tight. Diane had her hair curled. Evan was wearing a button-down shirt, looking miserable. They looked like a nice, wholesome family here to sign a mortgage. When Mr. Heller saw me approach the glass door, he smiled and stood up. Mark and Diane turned around, their faces arranged in welcoming, forgiving expressions until they saw Dana. The smiles vanished. Mark's face went slack. Diane's hand flew to her throat. Mr. Heller opened the door. Mrs. Russell, good to see you. Come in. Come in. We just need to grab a few extra chairs. He looked at Dana, confused. And this is? Dana Miles, Dana said, stepping forward and shaking his hand firmly. I am Ms. Russell's legal counsel. I will be sitting in on this meeting. Mr. Heller blinked. Legal counsel? Is there a problem? That depends on what paperwork you have on your desk. Mr. Heller? Dana said pleasantly. We squeezed into the small office. The air conditioning was humming, but the room felt suffocatingly hot. Mark refused to look at me. He stared at the nameplate on Mr. Heller's desk. Evan looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Well, Mr. Heller said, clearing his throat nervously. He shuffled a stack of papers. Mark and Diane asked for this meeting to clear up some confusion regarding the refinancing of the business debt and the vehicle loan consolidation. They mentioned there was a communication breakdown, but that we were ready to move forward with you as the primary guarantor. He pushed a document toward me. It was a consolidation loan application. $80,000. It combined the truck, the business overdraft, and a credit card balance into one new note. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at my father. You told him I agreed to this? I asked. Mark's jaw worked. We thought, if we put it all in one pot, with a lower rate, it makes sense. Leah, it protects everyone. We just need to fix the cash flow. Dana reached out and put her hand on the document, stopping me from touching it. Mr. Heller, Dana said, her voice dropping to a professional chill. My client did not agree to this. In fact, my client sent a formal cease and desist letter to Mr. and Mrs. Russell 3 days ago, prohibiting them from using her name or financial information for any purpose. Mr. Heller's eyes widened. He looked at Mark. Is that true? It is a misunderstanding, Mark said quickly, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. Leah is just upset about the terms. That is why we are here, to negotiate the terms. There are no terms to negotiate. I said, Mr. Heller, Dana continued, I assume you ran a credit check on Miss Russell to prepare these documents? Well, yes, Mr. Heller said. We have her file on record as a linked account holder from previous years. Stop right there. I said. I looked at Mr. Heller. I need to know something. Do you have a record of my name being used as a reference or a guarantor on any other applications for Russell Outdoor Supply in the last 6 months? Mr. Heller looked uncomfortable. He typed something into his computer. The clicking of the keys was the only sound in the room. Mark shifted in his chair. Leah, don't do this here. Not in front of... Mr. Heller stopped typing. He frowned at the screen. Actually, he said slowly, there is a note here. From February. What does it say? I asked. It says Mark Russell attempted to refinance the commercial line of credit using Leah Russell as a linked guarantor. The application was flagged internally because the signature on the consent form didn't match our file card for you. We rejected it for insufficient verification. I felt a cold triumph. They had tried here too, and they had failed, but they hadn't told me. They had just moved on to the next lender. Quick Cap, where the notary was less diligent. So you knew. I said to Mark, you knew the bank rejected it because it looked like a forgery. So you went to a predatory lender instead. I didn't forge anything, Mark shouted. He stood up, his chair hitting the wall behind him. I signed it as your agent. You have always helped us. I have power of attorney. No, you don't, I said calmly. You never have. Mr. Heller looked alarmed. Mr. Russell, please sit down. If there is an allegation of forgery, it is not an allegation, Dana said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the copy of the Quick Cap document I had seized from the dining room table. This is a notarized document my client found in Mr. Russell's possession. The signature is a forgery. The notary is currently being reported to the state board. She slid the paper across the desk to Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller looked at it. He looked at Mark. His face hardened. Bankers deal with risk for a living. And suddenly, Mark Russell wasn't a long-time customer. He was a radioactive liability. Mr. Russell, Mr. Heller said, his voice icy. This institution cannot proceed with any applications involving your daughter. In fact, given this information, I will need to send your current business accounts to our fraud department for review to ensure no other irregularities exist. Mark turned pale. You can't do that. That will freeze my operating cash. You should have thought of that before you impersonated a cosigner. Mr. Heller said. Mark turned to me. His eyes were wild, cornered. Are you happy? He spat. You are destroying the business. You are destroying everything I built. You destroyed it yourself. Dad, I said, you destroyed it when you spent money you didn't have. You destroyed it when you lied to Evan. I looked at Evan. He was sitting perfectly still, staring at his father. Evan, I said gently, do you hear this? The consolidation loan? It wasn't about your truck. It was about wrapping Dad's business debt into your truck loan so he could hide it. Mark whirled on Evan. Don't listen to her. She is jealous. She wants to see us fail. Evan, I am doing this for you. To get you the truck. Why did you need the $80,000? Evan asked. His voice was quiet. What? Mark snapped. The truck was $55,000. Evan said. He pointed at the application on the desk. This says $80,000. Where was the other $25,000 going? Mark stammered. It was for insurance. And taxes. An operating capital for your new contracting gig? No, Evan said. He stood up. He looked taller than I had ever seen him. Operating capital. Evan repeated. That means paying your debts. He looked at the truck keys sitting on the desk. The shiny fob with the GMC logo. You told me the truck was my chance. Evan said. You told me Leah was being a bitch because she didn't believe in me. But she wasn't stopping me. She was stopping you. Evan. Diane cried out, reaching for his arm. Don't speak to your father like that. He is under so much stress. Stop it. Mom, Evan said. He pulled his arm away. Just stop. You knew too. You knew about the $80,000. Diane burst into tears. We were trying to save the house. If the business goes under, the house goes. We did it for all of us. The room went silent. The truth was finally naked on the table. It wasn't about a truck. It wasn't about respect. It was about a desperate clawing for survival by two people who refused to downsize, refused to admit failure, and were willing to cannibalize their children's futures to keep up appearances. I looked at Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, I said, I want to make a formal request. Yes. Miss Russell? Please place a permanent note on my file at this credit union. I will not cosign. I will not loan money. I will not be listed as a reference. If any application comes across your desk with my name on it, I want you to treat it as criminal fraud and contact the police immediately. I will do that right now. Mr. Heller said. He was typing furiously. I turned to my parents. It is over. I said, the shell game is over. Diane looked up from her hands. Her face was streaked with mascara. She looked old, broken. Leah, she whispered, how can you be so cold? We are family. You have to choose family. People make mistakes, but you don't call the police on your father. You don't bring a lawyer to a family meeting. I looked at her. I remembered the years of guilt, the years of loans that were never paid back, the years of fixing their messes while they called me cold for asking questions. I took a step closer to her. You only call it family when you need my name. I said. The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. When I graduated? You didn't come because Dad was busy. When I got promoted? You asked if I could lend you money. When I tried to plan a vacation? You canceled it to steal the refund. That isn't family. Mom, that is a parasite. I turned to Evan. You have a choice. Evan, I said, you can walk out of here with them and spend the next 10 years paying off their mistakes, or you can walk out. Evan looked at the truck keys on the desk. He looked at Mark, who was glaring at him with a mixture of rage and fear. Evan reached out. Mark smiled slightly, thinking Evan was reaching for the keys. But Evan didn't grab the keys. He grabbed his own cell phone off the desk. I am not signing anything, Evan said to Mr. Heller, and I am returning the truck today. I don't care about the negative equity. I will work it off, but I'm not signing this consolidation. Evan, Mark shouted, you ungrateful little... Evan turned his back on him. He walked to the door. "Are you coming?" "Lee?" he asked me. "Yeah." I said, "I am coming." I nodded to Dana. She closed her briefcase with a satisfying snap. We walked out of the office. Behind us, I heard Mark start yelling at Mr. Heller, a desperate, impotent sound that was quickly cut off by the heavy glass door closing. We stood in the parking lot. The sun was high and bright. The air smelled of asphalt and exhaust. But to me, it smelled like freedom. Evan looked at his truck. "I really like that truck," he said sadly. "It was a nice truck." I agreed, but it was too heavy. "Evan, it was carrying too much weight." He nodded. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my brother, not the person my parents had twisted him into. "I am sorry." "Lee," he said, "for the text, for saying you were ruining my life. You were actually saving it." "I know," I said. He took a deep breath. "I am going to drive it to the dealership. Then I guess I need a ride. Can you drive me home? Not to their house, to my friend's place. I'm going to crash on his couch for a while." I smiled. "I can drive you." I turned to Dana. "Thank you," I said. Dana smiled. "Send me the bill for the therapy you are going to need." She joked. "But seriously, Leah, you did good. The affidavit is filed. The fraud alerts are live. If they try this again, they go to jail. And they know it now." I got into my car. Evan got into the truck to drive it one last time, to the dealership to surrender it. As I pulled out of the credit union lot, I saw my parents walking out of the front door. They looked small. They were arguing with each other, their gestures sharp and angry. They didn't look at me. They were already looking for the next way to spin the story. The next victim, the next patch for the leaking ship, but it wouldn't be me. I drove toward the highway. I passed the sign that said "Leaving Briar Glen." I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I reached over and turned up the radio. I was 33 years old. My credit score was locked. My identity was my own, and for the first time in my life, the road ahead belonged entirely to me. Thank you all so much for listening to Leah's story. It is a heavy journey to realize that the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But sometimes, drawing that hard line is the only way to save yourself. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to set a financial boundary with a family member that caused a fallout like this? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more realistic, gripping dramas about people reclaiming their lives, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in English in the comments section below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe and protect your peace.